When we stand from where we do today, and first take a step back and see what we were 10 years ago, India was 10 years ago. The world had barely got a glimpse of India through the Y2K. Our exports were just about starting to catch up. Our reserves just about were building. And foreign exchange was no longer a crisis, but growth was still not visible. Politically, we were still very dependent on the coalition government, but very fragile governments went through at that time. And from the world economy, if India had slipped out, not many could have noticed because we were not significant enough. Then after 2001, after the Indian industry really grew up and it started taking a positive climb up, there had been a continuous growth and it started becoming visible to many that India is going to be a very large economy. And the population is no longer going to be a liability, but it's going to be its strength. It was dramatically brought about when Goldman Sachs brought the BRIC report that by 2030, India would be a developed nation, which will be a very large economy. We always were concerned that, go back 50 years, between South Korea and Burma, between the two of them being equal, 50 years later, somebody else just grew rapidly somewhere, and the other one just stood wherever it did or slid back. Now, we were concerned something like that, which happened between US and Argentina from 1935 upwards in the next 50 years, if you were to count up, that should not happen to India. All the trajectory looks good, our current growth rate looks good, the markets are booming, people are coming here. I was talking to an investment banker, the head of investment banking of Citibank. He said their business was very good because everyone in the Fortune 1000 who's in India is projecting a growth of at least 5 times in the next 5 years. And those who are not in the Fortune 1000 want to buy a company to be in India. You can't afford not to be in India. So this is where we are standing today from where we stood 10 years ago. Where we are projected to go, many of you would have read some reports. But where does a thinking individual, how does he take the next few steps? How do you manage to get to the future to where you want? I'm here standing in front of you. If I go back 30 years when we founded HCL with 5 others, that was not the time when many of the business houses or even young graduates or people in the management teams look for building a conceptual framework. It's very, very important. Building a conceptual framework to see which industry to go into and which industry not to go into. If you are chasing an industry, maybe not going to is a strong word. If you are chasing an industry which is at a stage, how do you manage different industries differently, or how do you build it differently? How do you think of growth rates differently? This is where I thought that I would try and envelop the sessions that are going to come in with a conceptual framework. That's all that I would do, because a lot of numbers are known to most of you. You can dig it out of the internet. Economic growth could be done out of the internet. So when we were brainstorming this very subject internally, several thoughts came about. If you take the geology, if you take humans, if you take economies, if you take certain industries, they all seem to be going through certain stages. Now, go through basically 4 stages. Okay. So if you can just put that on. The stages to go through, yeah, is it visible? Because I can't read it. I hope it's visible. First is, it gets formed. Any idea, any technology, any area of science, it gets formed. Then for a long period, it goes through a period of evolution. So that's the second stage. From evolution, it goes through a period of transformation. It is here really economy and businesses start playing a role. After going through the transformation, which is always a very disruptive process, it's a very disruptive process. It disrupts the way it's manufactured, the way it's used. It has a very profound impact. And it reaches a certain end after which it kind of starts dissipating. Let me give you a few examples so that what I say becomes clear. If you take human progression, life kind of evolved some 4,000 million years ago. Then it moved to land 600 million years ago. Ice Age, which is when dinosaurs became extinct, that is 65. Then first upright human ancestor showed up somewhere around 5 million years ago. 3,000 years ago, if you just see the curve, is the only time when humans started using iron tools. And the world population is about 50 million. And now the human population is 6.5 billion, bursting its seams. But you can see there are various things that are taking place. It's a very dramatic growth. You just plot it. It will just fit into a certain curve form. And these curves are not to scale. These are, if you work it out, it will fit into a logarithmic scale. Now, from human evolution, if we come to veterinary, it's a very strange period. Somewhere around 500,000 years ago, about 400,000 years ago, it's the first form of weapon that was used, which is a spear. Then it waited for till 50,000 BC for the bow and arrow to appear. It's an evolution stage. Then gunpowder shows up in 880, and the first nuclear bomb was dropped in 1945. Today, in the last 50 years, we have reached a stage in which we can destroy the world many times over. 1990 was the Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty. You see the curve. There is a disruptive phase in this industry. There is a transformation phase in this industry. And then it just dissipates off. It's not meaningful anymore to be in veterinary. In any form, as a user, as a nation. Go to transportation industry. The wheel and axle was about 4,000 BC. Then you go through internal combustion engine, bicycle, automobile, aeroplane flight and space flight. There isn't going to be any more very dramatic forms of transportation. Like Sudhir was mentioning, you're going to beam a person from place A to place B. But it still forms a very, very similar curve. So if you were to be in transportation industry, the period is when it takes a transformation phase. You can still be in the transportation industry now, but you should know that this is a phase of dissipation. It's a period in which how you run it will be very different. Okay. Boolean algebra was discovered sometime around 1848. Microprocessors came right after I left college. That was 1971. Then very rapidly the development started, and early 80s saw PCs, right after that we saw wireless and internet, and there is a computer for every 10 humans. It's almost like there's an automobile for every 10 humans. So I've just put a full stop there because I don't know how fast it will dissipate, but anyone planning to enter the computer industry, it's very important to know that this is where you are. I'll give couple of examples of where the industries are. The information industry is towards the end of its transformation. It's going to become more or less in a dissipation phase from here onwards. If you take communication, which is wireless, which is that side of it, which started almost 10 years ago, is again going through towards the end phase. In the dissipation phase, it's important to remember cases like IBM. If you don't spot it right, what happens? IBM was standing there in 1992 with 550,000 employees, with a core of businesses like typewriters and PCs and mini computer equivalents, all of them having hopelessly no future, having 550,000 people, out of which the customers really wanted the services of 250,000 people. This is where managing the future becomes very important. You should know not only where you want to go, but also you should know where you are. Now, some new person comes in and makes changes, and if you see 12 years later where IBM stands, today the services business forms 2/3 of all that IBM does. IBM was looking at the past when, they were always fighting on the mainframe, but those days are over. Even now, if you look at the sale of Lenovo, which they made, they went into selling Lenovo after Lenovo went into selling the PC business after it started making losses. Siemens also did almost the same thing. Many of us, when you look at the future, we need to look at it with this very clearly in mind. Because the size of IBM or size of Siemens, they're all colossal corporations. You can be very colossal. You know very well that if money can be a determining factor, there would always be someone larger than any corporation. Some corporations will be larger than other corporations. Otherwise, there will be a group of corporations which will be larger than anybody. If you take some of this private equity buyout funds, they go up and buy companies for 25 billion and 30 billion. The size of this transaction started appearing 25 years ago. So where you stand today and where you want to go, money will not be the determining factor. It is your acute understanding of where you stand and what strategy that you draw to get it. Where you're standing, meaning that are you in a transformatory stage of where you want to go, or are you in a dissipative stage of where you want to go? If so, what kind of strategies that you're going to draw? This is the envelope within which you should see the next 6 sessions that are going to take place. So I thought I'll just set the envelope, set the framework for you, within which you could take a view of all the sessions that will be gone through during today and tomorrow. Thank you for the opportunity.